I'm proud to stand here and say that the state of our state is strong, but we have work to do.
North Country State Senator Dan Stec joins us this week to talk about the governor's proposals and agenda for the legislative session.
And Senator Dan Stec joins us now. Good to see you. Welcome. The new session is underway. As always, it kicks off with the State of the State address. Let's begin there. What are your thoughts of what you heard from Governor Kathy Hochul? What stood out?
My overall takeaways, not a lot of detail, and that's not a complaint. It's just that was the nature of the speech she gave. I think, one area that I think everyone can agree on that she certainly highlighted was our need to do more for mental health issues in the state of New York. I think that certainly they existed before COVID, but then COVID exacerbated those. And I think that is impacting a lot of areas that we're seeing in the state, including public safety. That's one of the areas where Republicans and Democrats seem to disagree on is, how to fix the public safety issue with the bail reform. But I think everyone can agree that, a large contributor to these issues is mental health. And so I think that was an area that I think we were all on board with pursuing. Obviously, I think from there, we start to differ. She started to focus on wanting to index the minimum wage to inflation, which, we already have an affordability crisis in New York, which is why people are leaving the state hundreds of thousands at a time. And I think just adding more costs of any nature, but certainly one that is as impactful as minimum wage is going to just, further expedite people fleeing the state. Climate action, she mentioned wanting to ban, and a little tongue in cheek here, but basically in essence, she talked about banning in the very near future gas stoves. Is now everyone's seeing memes all over the internet about banning gas stoves for preferring electrical power, and just the infrastructure isn't ready there yet, and it will be extremely expensive. The hearing that we had today, an estimate, and many of us feel it's a low estimate, is $270 billion to convert the state over to all electric, and on a timeline that's not realistic. The transition. I'm not necessarily saying that the goal it doesn't have merit, but certainly to just arbitrarily pick dates out of there and with no regard to cost is very concerning.
The governor sounds as if she's willing to discuss more changes to the bail reform laws. You mentioned those, which you and your fellow Republicans have been calling for since they passed in 2019. Is that encouraging, and what in particular still needs addressing?
It's always encouraging to hear the executive say that they're willing to talk about an issue. Obviously, the proof is in the pudding as far as, what do we actually see come from that? And of course, the other very real reality is that she has to deal with the Assembly and Senate Democrats. Many of them are to the left of her and are going to double down and dig their heels in on this. So they're going to resist. I'm also concerned that this could merely be a check the box exercise where she, they'll do some symbolic and relatively minor tweak to bail reform in order to be able to say we addressed it. That's what they did the year after they implemented bail reform as part of the budget.
And what's the biggest issue that still needs addressing, giving judges more discretion?
Yes, there's a list that was put into the law that are criminal offenses that judges are not allowed to consider bail on, and it's literally just looking at that list of about 50 or 60 crimes. Most of them are non-violent offenses, but there are dozens that are violent offenses. These are people that, hey, maybe you want a judge to consider, holding somebody on bail because of public safety. And to handcuff them and say, no, you're going to work off this list, and if they're charged with these crimes, you can't even think about bail. I just think it's short-sighted and foolish.
The governor talked a lot about the need to create new housing in communities across New York.
So I think really what we need to do is we need to acknowledge that we have a supply and demand issue, and it's very expensive to build housing in New York State. We've got some of the highest labor costs, some of the highest insurance costs, energy costs, materials costs, regulatory environment in New York State, specifically in the Adirondacks. I'm waiting. The governor wants to mandate that every community increase their housing stock. I'm waiting to see how the politics of that play out when environmental groups on her side of the political aisle get the memo that, hey, we want to make it easier to construct housing in the Adirondack Park. It's not just a rural issue, and it's not just an urban issue. It is literally across the state. But a lot of it comes with it is so expensive to construct things in New York State and to live in New York State that it's hard to keep up with the housing market. There's just not enough supply.
The governor is saying no to raising the personal income tax, but does she offer anything else to, in her words, make New York more affordable?
No, I mean, we have a major spending problem. The state of New York, our budget is $224 billion. It jumped a lot as an aside, and I'll say it now because we're not in a political year. So it's not like it's a run up to election day, but it was true before election day, just as it is after election day, that under one party rule, we've seen state spending is like a hockey stick. The curve took a steep turn up when we had one party rule take over in Albany. And now the state's $224 billion is larger than the budget of Florida and Texas is combined. And those are two states that both have more people in them than New York. I'm not saying that we should be cutting our state budget in half, but the math is that two states that have more people than New York have combined budgets that are less than New York State's budget. So we have a spending problem in New York State, and it's been falling on deaf ears for years with the Democrats that are running the state.
Do you want the legislature to revisit the concealed carry law and fix some of the concerns that you and other North Country lawmakers have brought up over the past several months?
Well, I think we have to, and I do want to, and I think that eventually the courts are going to tell us to. Until it gets overturned in court, it's the law, and I don't like that, but I see it for what it is. I don't think it was a serious attempt to comply with what the Supreme Court ordered. I think it was a defiant move, and I think that eventually it's going to work its way through the courts, and it will be tossed out, and they'll tell us, get it right, New York. And I think that when they do that, hopefully, the adults in the room will come to the plate and come up with a law that is constitutional and works without trouncing people's constitutionally guaranteed freedoms.
You have called on the state to help find a reuse for Mariah Shock in Essex County and other closed prisons. One idea is to use Mariah for housing or even as a training facility for conservation officers.
We have a smaller population now, so they've been closing these facilities. My issue all along, and I do give the governor some credit here, that unlike her predecessors that closed facilities, she at least created a task force that is trying to look at repurposing them. So that's great. It may be too late for some of the more ugly ones now. I mean, Gabriel's is, I've toured Gabriel's, and it is in tough shape. And it's not the only one, but Mariah, there's still hope for, because it's a new facility. The unfortunate part about Mariah Shock is, again, I and a lot of my constituents may disagree with what the majorities from New York City have been pushing when it comes to criminal justice, but Mariah Shock was exactly the kind of progressive alternative to traditional incarceration that progressives said they always wanted. It was discipline and substance and drug abuse treatment and granting them skills and in a really concentrated manner. It was less time that they were incarcerated, cheaper to the taxpayer, and with a proven improved recidivism rate. These were people that were much more likely to stay out of prison because of a program like that. We should have been expanding the Mariah Shocks in the state, not closing them down. So with that said, we have this facility. I would greatly prefer a reversal here from the governor and say, you know what, let's reopen Shock. I mean, that's my preferred desired outcome. Short of that, let's find a productive use for it so that it doesn't turn into a Camp Gabriel's or a Lion Mountain or a Chateauguay. And if that's housing, great. If that's some sort of DEC conservation dedicated facility to serve needs in the Adirondacks, that makes sense too.
Quite a bit of drama in Albany this week. A confirmation hearing for the governor's pick to be chief judge of the New York Court of Appeals. Hector LaSalle, a Democrat, shot down by Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee who believe he's too conservative. Do you think the governor will have to withdraw his nomination now, or would you like to see him get a hearing and vote before the full Senate?
Frankly, I think that the Constitution requires it. That the governor is in a position to make these appointments, and then they're subject to confirmation by the Senate. I know that our history has been that they always get a vote on the floor, but I think that regardless of what the Judiciary Committee did, that the Senate is still required to give her appointee a hearing on the Senate floor. He's certainly qualified, and we should be hearing him out. I know I want my opportunity to ask questions and hear from him myself.
Have you had a chance to get up to Lake Placid for any of the FISU games?
Yeah, so I was there all last weekend. I started up there Thursday night and I didn't leave. I ran all over. I was in Potsdam at Clarkson for a early round men's hockey game on Friday morning. Then I went to see women's curling in Saranac Lake on Friday afternoon, and then Friday evening I was in Lake Placid for some ceremonies there. I saw the opening ceremonies on Thursday night. The facilities were ready to host the games. I know that there's been some observations and complaints locally from some businesses that they did not see the hoped for and anticipated spike in attendance, and therefore people walking around and spending money in Lake Placid. That's something I think that we'll probably be hearing about in the coming weeks. We'll get that feedback. But as far as the flow of the games and the facilities, from everything that I've heard, they're going really well. We're getting tremendous exposures to the Lake Placid region internationally. So, we're certainly back on the map as a winter sports recreation destination. It's great to have our part of the world highlighted for the rest of the world right now.
Senator Dan Stec, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.